Welcome to the Question Table. The Question Table is a podcast of the Way Home Ministries, and I am your host, Sylvia Geronimo. This is a place where we don't rush to answers, and where curiosity is an act of faith, and where the questions themselves shape us. Today's question has stayed with me long after the new year began. It actually came at a New Year's retreat I attended through soulcare.com. It's a beautiful organization offering rich resources for spiritual formation and for soul care. And the question goes something like this. If you were God and you had provided all that you have, or you had allowed all that has happened in your life, what might you have in mind for someone who has this life inventory? I know that's a long question, but let's just sit with that for a moment. Because this is not a simple question, it is layered. It has a theological layer, but it is also deeply personal. And it has implications not only for how we see ourselves, but for how we see one another. There is a theological tension that we live inside. Theologically, this question brushes up against a mystery we will never fully resolve. The mystery that God ordains and God allows, but that we also choose and we cooperate. There are also places we resist and places we accept and things that we reject. So forever and a day, we will live inside the tension of these truths. And Scripture holds them together without apology and invites us to live faithfully within the mystery rather than trying to dismantle it. But today, I don't want to stay in abstraction. I want us to move towards practice, because the question, complex as it is, has very real and very practical implications. And I would like to explore it in two ways, with two sides. The side where we imagine ourselves as God, looking at a life, and then the other side where we place ourselves before God, receiving what He is doing. So let's start there. Let's start by taking inventory. And in that way, to start seeing your life with new eyes, perhaps. So this question does require something of us. It asks us to take inventory. And I want to encourage you this week to do exactly that. As deeply or as lightly as you wish, but do it. So take inventory possibly of the following: of your resources, of your skills and talents, your opportunities, your experiences, your personality, your character, your limitations, your losses, and your unfinished places. And do that however you want. When I completed this exercise, I just drew a bunch of circles and filled in the circles after I had headed them. Maybe you want to do it in bullet point. Maybe you want to do it in different pages. You do what works for you. And when you've done that, don't just rush past it. You just sit back and look and ask yourself, what do I see? What is before me? Let your life speak back to you. And then you can return to the question. If I were God and I had handed down this inventory before me, what might I be shaping in this person's life? Let's meet the God that has His hands in the dust. You know, Scripture repeatedly describes God as one who works with His hands. He shapes, and then He molds, He creates. God crafts and He prunes, And sometimes he tends and he grows and he holds. And so we find that God in Scripture is called the potter or the gardener, the creator, even the midwife. This is a God who gets his hands into the nitty-gritty of life. And even Jesus tells us plainly, my Father is always at work. Always. So what might God be shaping in you? Who are you becoming? And then this is the harder question. Are you cooperating? Because there is a choice between resistance and curiosity. When we often, or I can say when I don't understand what's happening, when things are hard and I am tired, when life looks nothing like I had expected or even wanted, my instinct is towards resistance. I can tighten up, I brace myself, I protest. But what if instead of resisting, we become curious? What if we took inventory and stayed open? What if we said, I know and I believe that God is at work here, even now, even in this? What if we allowed God to use the dust of our lives and make something of it and breathe life into it? You know, the dust of our relationships, the dust of our work, even the dust of our illness and our age, the dust of our disappointments and our grief, our losses and unmet expectations. Scripture tells us God took dust, shaped it, and breathed into it and made a human being. He made you. So maybe the invitation is this: let it go, let it take shape. You might be surprised by what emerges. And what would happen if we turn the question towards others? Now, let me take a moment and turn this question outward. Because here's something I know about myself and maybe about you too. I can easily say, I am a work in progress. But when I look at others, I often treat them like the finished product. I expect a finished product. And frankly, I don't always like what I see. I look at others and I can see the faults and the cracks and the deformations and the warped lines and the rough edges. And frankly, sometimes being around others gives me splinters. Watching them gives me hives. Could we just return them to the manufacturer as faulty merchandise and ask for a refund? Now, I know I'm exaggerating, but only a little, because we tend to notice what's wrong long before we notice what's right. But if we start seeing others as we are, as still being shaped, that this person, this difficult and this frustrating person is also being shaped and often reshaped, then I see them differently, because their inventory may be filled with things they shouldn't have, but they do. Maybe their inventory is missing things they should have, but they don't. So what is required of us here? Well, I can think of compassion and a boatload of patience and mercy, because God is at work here too, with this person too. And here's where the question becomes transformational. Instead of calling out what is wrong, what if we called out what is good? Because to call out the good is to bless, and to bless is to collaborate with God in the shaping of a life. Encouragement is not the denial of reality. It is participation in redemption. When we speak life and when we speak courage and possibility and goodness into others, we align ourselves with what God is already doing. So there is an invitation in this question. Let me bring us back to the heart of the question. What is God shaping in you? And what might God be shaping in the other? Because, friends, shaping is taking place. It is. You are not static and you are not finished, and God is not absent. You are being invited to notice and to watch and to participate. So let's do this. Let's take inventory. Let's stay curious. Let's cooperate. Let's call out the good. Let's bless. And let's trust the hands that still work the dust. Thank you, friends, for gathering at the question table. Until next time, keep living the questions.